This time, we will deep dive into the ocean perspective.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Women and Climate, for having me here. Unmute myself here. It is awesome to be in your company, and I just feel so happy to be in this space increasingly and love the comments that have been received thus far. I am putting my timer on so that I know it. I'm also having a weird timer issue with the Zoom. But my name's Jessie. I am the director of something called the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification. And I really loved, Nika, when you sort of started with my role in the climate movement is, and I'm going to start introducing myself in that capacity and asking all of our team members and community to do that. Because my role, I suppose, in the climate movement is talking more about ocean, in this case, acidification, but impacts to our ocean caused by increased greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide emissions, and that's warming, acidification, oxygen loss. And these are things that are really kind of invisible and pernicious issues that are happening in our ocean. They have consequences for species and ecosystems, and most importantly, the humans that rely on those species and ecosystems at all manner of scales and for all sorts of economic, but also social and spiritual purposes. Next slide. And so I'm embarrassed to say I'm not super new to the COP. This was my 7th COP. I cannot believe it, that I've been measuring my life in COPs most of my 30s. And I've been really lucky to be part of sort of this journey of people that are trying to elevate the topic of ocean at the UNFCCC very specifically. And that all started about COP29 at the Paris Climate Agreement. That doesn't really mention oceans. There's an ocean mention in the preamble, but that's about it. And it really is a huge loss when you think about the role that ocean plays both as our climate regulator, as a huge absorber of carbon dioxide naturally, and now we have excess CO2, and so unnaturally. And thinking about what activities ocean can play in the mitigation side, ocean renewable energy, thinking about wind and offshore and wave energy, blue carbon ecosystems, but also thinking about the consequences and the adaptation and the resilience needs for our ocean and her people, which is us, of course. So I'm really happy to say that from this advocacy, the UNFCCC actually now has an ocean and climate dialogue that started in 2019. And it's a place where parties gather and really start to talk about the ways we can integrate ocean mitigation, adaptation, technical capacity, financing issues for ocean issues across the UNFCCC mechanisms. There's an informal group called Friends of Ocean and Climate, which is a group of ocean-focused parties. They have been working to increase visibility on this topic and think about what we want to see from the UNFCCC and what we want to see parties working on domestically. And they delivered a joint statement in the final days of COP29. Next slide. And so I won't talk about what I'll share kind of what they wrote, but basically continuing to accelerate the importance and urgency for finance. Obviously, that was the big topic of this conversation at COP29. And how do we fund mitigation and adaptation activities that have to do with sustainable ocean-based climate action that is consequential for achieving the long-term goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. And a big part of that is just transition, not just in the mitigation side, but in the adaptation side. And so really noting developing countries, small island developing states, or big ocean states, and least developed countries. Next slide. And I'll just, putting again, that's what I wanted to highlight, talking about this just and equitable transition. This was a COP that really, a previous speaker spoke about the urgency. And I really echo that experience where this really felt like the moral imperative is on our shoulders now. And it's really time to be stepping up. And I could sense that in negotiations and could sense that in this question of finance, because that's really where the rubber hits the road and when we get into implementing what we need to do. Next slide. And I'm just going to quickly go through. These are pictures of the OA Alliance at different activities. We work to integrate acidification across mainstream policy documents. So we had here Greece and United States and Palau and other countries talking about that. Next slide. And a big focus on food security. And that's one thing I really wanted to hit home at this slide. Next slide. And so we had multiple talks. This is a colleague from Tanzania talking about the significance of ocean climate impacts of ocean on food security in Tanzania and different fisheries. Next slide. And this is a activity that a roundtable we did with the FAO. talking about their responsibilities for thinking about climate resilient fisheries and aquaculture, along with many other partners from Samoa, from Egypt, from Malawi in this photo. And final slide, two more, if you'll permit me, Michelle. This was the most important, well, one last one, go back. This was the most important one to me. Go back one slide. It's the statue slide. Can we go back one? So this was a statue that I saw at one of the venues, and it was a really beautiful statue called Double Standard. And so we'll share the slides, but it says, "I'm sitting on the back of a man. He is sinking under my burden, and I will do anything to help him, except stepping down from his back." And if you go to the next slide that just describes it very quickly, it was so beautiful to me, and it really summarized what we're trying to highlight and talk about and what the different responsibilities of our behaviors and actions are. I don't know if the slides are a little bit
Thank
out
you,
of whack.
Jesse. We're gonna have to cut you short now. Sorry about that.
Thank you for sharing this, Jessie. Up next, we have a youth